Today's episode of the Peaky Agilist podcast is proudly sponsored by Emergence, the Journal of Business Agility, brought to you by the Business Agility Institute. This quarterly publication brings you inspiring stories from the most innovative companies and explores themes of new ways of working, reclaiming management, and humanizing business. Full details of how to subscribe and receive a 10% discount is available down below in the description. Before we jump into today's episode, I'm just going to say a big welcome to Barney. Barney, how are you doing?
Very well, Paddy. Excited to be here with you on another episode of the Peaky Agilist.
Oh, you know what? It feels like it's been ages since we've actually caught up. It's been a few weeks, I think, hasn't it? Maybe at the last podcast episode was the last time we spoke.
Yes, it's been a while. And I think the weather we're seeing in Switzerland, the sun is vacationing somewhere else in the world. How does the weather look on your side?
It's a bit dull. It's not the greatest, but I'm hoping things are going to turn better as we go through the week. So hopefully we'll get some sunshine. So you can probably see I'm wearing a superhero t-shirt today. But today we have a real superhero, a real world superhero, or at least a superhero of mine. We're joined by someone that I had the amazing opportunity to work for. And I have to say, when I think about leadership and the people in your life that really epitomize some of the true agile traits of leadership, there's a few people that come to mind, and this young lady is one that comes at the top of that list. So welcome to the show, Wendy Redshaw. I'm so you can see from my voice, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Paddy, and thank you so much. And I also was very proud to be your leader as much as anything else, because you were amazing, and it was a real pleasure and an honor to work with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, Wendy, we've got a few questions lined up today for you to really explore some of those stories from the time that we worked together, but also throughout your life as well. So I'm going to jump straight into it. What I'd love to start with is to know a little bit more about your career journey and also some of your biggest highlights.
Okay, so a little bit about my career journey. Well, I guess my career journey started, when I was a kid, because my father was really an engineer and my mother was really creative. And my father's family had a tendency to only produce boys. And so the only way I could get his attention was to be STEM based. And so I guess that I was trying to be, the son that he wanted, by being engineering-y, but with a bit of creativity on the side. So I suppose it really started there. And I do think you kind of almost are formed as a person quite early on. And so I would say that, in terms of career journey, I've really been very, very fortunate, because I've been able to use those skill sets, which were not particularly prevalent, and sadly probably still aren't all that prevalent, actually, to really have a fantastic career that just combined almost like a triumvirate of people, technology, and business, like that. So yeah. And my career journey, basically, I did mathematics at Imperial College, so a STEM girl, really definitely. And then I went along to my career advisor and I said, tell me, what should I do as a job? And he said, well, most maths graduates go into accounting. And I'm like, not really sure I'd be a very good accountant at all. Any other suggestions? Because in those days it was leaflets you'd look at, and he said, well, look, as far as I can tell, you have a particular way about you, Wendy, and you should really think about getting a company that suits you in terms of values and beliefs and sort of ways of working. And I have to say that was probably the best advice I've ever had career-wise, because I went to join a company that had the tagline, nowadays it's be brilliant together. And it was like, it resonated so much. And I think if you have a company that resonates with you in terms of their values, their vision, etc., their purpose, it doesn't feel like work. And I have to say, I've had a fabulous career, ups and downs all over the place, but I've really learned so much. I've been so blessed. So my career journey really went from there. So I went to a software house. I majored in human-computer interaction and a branch of software engineering called knowledge engineering at the time, which really was just fabulous. Loved that. Then got involved with a startup, including being part of the team that started up Egg Bank, which was the first mobile and internet bank, or the telephone and internet bank. And I remember being told, well, that's never going to catch on. Yeah, right. Okay. So, that's really quite creative and quite startup, quite exciting. Clearly far too much adrenaline for one person. And I did that for 18 years, having my own company, doing startups, and really doing things, Paddy, like when we first got together, it's almost like a virtual startup. So you go into an organization, you work out loud. So one of my colleagues, John Stepper, wrote a book called Working Out Loud, so I can use that without the trademark. But working out loud, just pathologically collaborating, being noisy, being transparent, just having no silos whatsoever. And I think, Paddy, if you remember when we were together at Deutsche Bank, which is my first permanent job after all of this independent nonsense, we had a poster up, and the team was called Cockpit, and It said nothing at Cockpit is somebody else's problem. Well, actually, loads and loads of things weren't really our problem, but the fact was that was the attitude. It's like, yeah, let's really focus on what does the customer need, what does the client need, what can we do to make something better. And I guess it's kind of the epitome, I suppose, of servant leadership, and now there's a word for it. So,
wow, no, and the amazing thing is, Wendy, back then, seeing those sort of posters, it probably didn't really resonate with me as much, just because you sort of so into your work. But now I take a step back and I think back and I think, oh wow, that was such a phenomenal thing to do, like something as simple as that, and yet such a powerful message as well. And oh my God, at DB, there were always, just as any big global bank, there are always lots of challenges with other teams, other stakeholders, but really to instill that into your team that, hey, we should own everything that we can, is amazing. So no, thank you so much for that. Yeah. So moving on to agility, and why is agility so important for you? And working at another bank now, why is it such a major part of your DNA?
Yeah, so I think when you've worked in a particular way for a long period of time, and gradually the world has given names to the things that you do, it feels a little bit cheating. It's like being paid for something that you are rather than something that you've learned or something that you do. But I went to NatWest Group, and NatWest Group they really had an appetite to do more, to be more, to move into that digital arena and to change their ways of working. And so one of the things that we did was to introduce customer journeys, Agile. But agility isn't only about following some sort of methodology. It's also about agility of thought, agility of conceptualization, using design thinking, the way that you work with people, putting networks across the organization to encourage that sort of cohesion and the coordination. And collaboration is great, coordination is better. So if you really all have the same vision and you're all working towards the same aim, you really are not going to have to collaborate quite so much. But collaboration is definitely the name of the game in terms of as you get towards that coordination side of things. Why is it important? Well, it's applicable to everything that you do, and it means that you find people able to suddenly flourish. So people who you might go, well, they've been here ages, right? They're not really going to change. Oh, really? I remember just going back to Deutsche Bank, being told by one of my colleagues at the Exco, it's like, well, it's all very well for you. You've got this creative, young, dynamic team. Actually, all of my leadership team were like late 40s, early 50s, but they had characteristics that were genuinely normally, yeah, except for Paddy, obviously.
I'm kidding.
But I mean my leadership team with Paddy. We did have a young creative team as well.
Yeah.
But actually, it was more that the people who were leaders, who you'd naturally have thought, well, they're at the stage in their career that they're not going to be very flexible and adaptable. Suddenly, given this opportunity, they were, and it was being treated as a creative creative and young team because the people who were in it, whatever age they were being creative and young. They were thinking outside the box. They were working with others. They were having fun. And I mean, I remember distinctly, I came home and I have 5 children and the 2 little ones are boys. And they were really into Nerf guns, right? Which were it's a type of play gun thing, which probably I shouldn't approve of, but, everyone had them. Anyway, so, and they said, oh yeah, we've got these cool guns, mummy, everyone's got them. And I'm like, yeah, I've got those at work. It was so cool. It was great. I mean, I'm sure that we haven't introduced them now. I think they've kind of gone out of the fad slightly, but the fact was we were having fun, literally, with the things that we were doing. And you could say, well, okay, fine, we're doing that, but were you delivering? All absolutely 100%. So I'm fast forward now into NatWest Group, and working in this way, we had the pandemic, we all went into lockdown, and obviously everyone's wanting to keep their customers absolutely safe. And so we had what was called a heightened awareness period, right? So some people call it a change freeze, right? Actually, small print, it's a heightened awareness period, which means that you have to just be more aware. So every single day we looked at the releases that we would be doing during the day. And we did 4 times as many releases during those early stages of the pandemic to get things out for our customers than we did otherwise. And that's because of that swarming. It's because of that agile way of working. It's because of that pathological collaboration to get something for the customers. And we actually find I have an online banking team, and the online banking system is going to be replatformed onto a much more digital system. But at the moment, it's on an older system, and you could say, well, they're not going to improve. But you can use these types of techniques to improve everything. And my online banking platform, they did 8 releases last year, which is phenomenal for an old platform. That's because the mindset of the people who are working on it are like, yeah, let's go. How can we actually embrace this? And they've done so supremely well. So it's genuinely for everyone. And you could say, well, what about those types of traditionally waterfall projects? You can still get some agile in there and get that sort of throughput and that traction. You just have to look for it sometimes.
No, that's a really good point. I remember when back at Deutsche Bank, we were called Agile Services. And I remember someone saying to us, so would you guys help us out? We're using Waterfall. And there's almost like a look, we all looked at each other going, is that allowed? Like, are we allowed to bring Agile into Waterfall, or are the two totally separate? And I totally agree with you. There's always some level of agility in everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, agility, people were really preoccupied, weren't they, with Agile with a capital A, whereas actually agility comes in many forms. It is the automation of testing, it's CI/CD, it's the tool chains that you use, it's the design thinking methodology, it's how you do your design, how much customer engagement do you have. There's a whole range of things that can actually accelerate things safely and delightfully. And it's a case of actually finding the ones that's appropriate for your program or your activity.
Absolutely. I'm just going to go back to another story very quickly, actually, Wendy, when you were talking about having fun with the Nerf guns. I remember the first sort of team meeting I was invited to when I joined your wonderful group. And I was based in a totally different office. So I was in the Birmingham office, and I had traveled down to London that one time. Hopefully I'm allowed to say this. It was a Friday afternoon, and you had a sort of a drinks type of session where every Friday the team would chill out and relax. And someone offered me a beer, and I thought it was a test. I thought, hang on, if I accept this, like, am I in trouble? Like, because of the mindset that I had, my leadership, in a big bank had always been very strict about, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. And I was thinking, is this allowed? And I just remember the energy in that room was phenomenal. I remember you used to get people to talk about like their highlights of the week. They used to share photographs. It was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that, in terms of the other teams I'd worked with. Yeah,
that was probably my favorite meeting of the week, not because of the alcohol specifically, but it was basically end of sprint retro though. So we'd have end of sprint demos, but we'd also have things that we do that were fun. So I remember we kind of broke down into teams and did gingerbread houses, right, just for a laugh. And you know, you'd share what Paddy's just described as it was called, it's probably really politically incorrect, actually. I shouldn't really say this, but it was high point, low point, I could have slapped somebody. Now, before you think it's a terrible thing, just look at the psychology of it. What that meant is that in the round, and there was probably, I don't know, 40 people at that meeting, we basically took over the boardroom. And that's, by the way, why we were allowed to have alcohol. It was the last meeting of the week. Everybody had already done all of their hours. And we promised to only stay in that meeting room. And we had tiny little cups. We all had a bit, but it was just kind of cool. And everyone was a bit jealous of the fact that I got dispensation, but I did have dispensation for that, just putting it out there. Anyway, we were basically going to be there for that's the last meeting of the week. And by doing high point, low point, I could have slapped somebody. You couldn't only talk about bad. You couldn't only talk about someone who you wanted to slap. You could talk about just high points if you wanted to, just to sort of share some goodness. But the reason for doing that and to doing that in that particular meeting was that so this is how it worked. So Paddy would say, oh yeah, we did this really great thing, and we were and everyone did really well there, and everyone go, yeah, that's right, and everyone was celebrating the success, and then, yeah, but we also did this is really good. It's like everyone's like, oh, that is terrible. Paddy, oh dear, that's awful. And so there's very much a sort of camaraderie going on. And when Paddy had someone to slap, it might have been within our team, it might have been without our team. By the way, we didn't slap anyone. He would say, yeah, and this kind of thing happened, and everyone then makes a judgment call as to whether or not a slap would be appropriate. And so we kind of used it, and we go, yeah, everyone. So it was a very tangible, kind of fun, a bit of a laugh, but the actual seriousness of it is it meant that anything was really winding you up, you got off your chest, and then your weekends were your own. And actually, from a well-being point of view, it's an incredibly powerful thing to have done, because you start then the week, you haven't carried stuff forward from the week before. And actually, high point, low points, I could have slapped somebody. Loads of people remember that, just for the sort of energy that came around it, and how it stopped silos just and things grinding away at each other, so that you ended up with these walls being put in place there.
No, for sure, Wendy. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to ask one more question before we jump over to Barney, because I know she's dying to ask you a bunch of questions as well. So I guess, with sort of banking going through lots of disruption, digital disruption, what do you see as a future of banking from everything that you're seeing?
Well, you'll remember that I have an expression which is, I don't do or, I do and, right? So I think the future of banking, so if we think about where has that disruption come from, I'm in a retail bank now. I'm the Chief Digital Information Officer, as you said, but for retail banking. And so I'm really looking at that customer focus piece. And the disruption that's come in retail banking has really come from sort of the neobanks, the new digital banks that have sprung up like little, newbies. And there's all these legacy banks with their branches and their telephony and stuff. It all seems a bit old hat. Actually, what we find with the new banks is that they come through. And by the way, I think my dog is going to bark in a minute because one of my sons is home. Just letting you know, because it can be quite loud. What can happen there is that you can think, we can see that as being, well, that will come through and then nothing else will exist. Well, actually, if you look during the pandemic, there very much was a return to trust. And so NatWest Group, as a bank that has both the digital side of things and the physical side of things, actually has a hybrid bank which is even stronger. So it's an and. So from a retail banking perspective, the topic is an and. It's both physical, the best 24/7 customer support, together with the best digital experience, sort of a relationship bank for the sort of the digital world, as it were. So I see that as being something that we very much will see with the best of the banks. I think it gives an edge to that legacy as well. But I also see another and that and is the opening up of banks. So it started really with PSD2, And really, so NatWest Group is actually, it has the Bank of APIs website, and we actually have their ability for external parties to come and use our APIs into our systems. Now, the reason for that is that I actually think that embedded finance and that way of being present within, should I say, will also be something that we see an and of. It doesn't take away from an existing bank, but it adds to it. And I guess the other thing that I would say is that we're going to start to see things that are a little bit more science fiction-y with regard to the way in which we have our bank channel hopping and the way in which the bank turns up to see the customer when they need it. So kind of watch this space in that respect. Right? I've got quite a few things, irons in the fire, which are fun.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. I wish you could reveal more, but I'm sure you're sworn to secrecy.
I only do exciting, Paddy, and you know that.
Have you got a job? Anyway, no, let's not go there.
Speak to me afterwards, yeah.
Right, Barney, over to you.
Thanks, Paddy. So, Wendy, speaking of disruption, and disruption has somehow become this buzzword in organizations today. There is no sign of the world slowing down. The pace around us is kind of increasing and increasing and increasing. And so I think at such a time, demystifying the purpose and meaning of work is so powerful to keep the momentum of collective intent. And so I recently learned that you won the CTO CIO of the Year award at the FDM, Every Woman in Technology. And to give, congratulations, woohoo! And to give the listeners a little bit of a context, this award is given to women who have led a meaningful tech change in an organization. So Wendy, can you share a little bit about, this change that you were so instrumental in driving?
Well, I mean, I'm fortunate to be blessed with an incredibly open-minded, forward-thinking engineering team. A combination of business and technology, as you were, and I've also got some amazing colleagues that are not that close to the digital side of things, but genuinely in the sort of business areas and the support and control functions, and they have an appetite for safe change for our customers, and they have an appetite for transformation. And when I was joining, we were in a position where the middle tier of our mobile offering was actually on an end-of-life componentry, and some work had been done on that, but essentially we were, in order to be PSD2 compliant, we really had to crack on, and the way in which we would be able to do that best and in a most agile way for our customers was really to move into the public cloud, which from a legacy perspective, the legacy banks, I'm calling us that just for now. And in terms of the legacy banks, no one else had actually done that at the time. So persuading the actual, the hierarchies and the governance forums, etc., that this would be an okay thing to do was quite an achievement. In particular, because if we want to use an analogy, it would be that we were driving a car with something like 8 million people in it. Okay, the analogy is going to break down. 8 million people in it. Ignore the 8 million customers driving this car, and we were basically going to be changing not just the tires but the axle as well. And we didn't want anyone to lose it, have any downtime whatsoever. And that was going to take place over 3 brands: NatWest, RBS, and Ulster Bank, and in fact some of the little brands too. It was also going to be affecting our business customers. But other than that, everything was fine. So it was really a case of, I came in, I actually removed a couple of layers of management. And when I was doing my recruitment for my new team, I turned over, imagine in paper, I turned over the name and I turned over the location, and I just interviewed on the basis of the skill sets and of the skill sets that I was needing. And actually, I ended up with a leadership team who are, if you wanted to go with a flower bed analogy, were lovely little, lots of different diverse flowers just starting to grow through. So I had a sort of fairly young team, as I had young or new team, as I had also at Deutsche Bank. And I was really able to, basically be a servant leader, get into the work, allow them to do that work and just be there to enable. And we were able to successfully do that. We didn't have any downtime, and we actually moved our middle tier of our mobile stack, with everybody using it, onto the public cloud with data not at rest but in transit. So it was a really beautiful implementation, and I ought to do a shout out to Miguel Tate and to Liquan Taylor, who were absolutely amazing at just getting that together. I mean, there were many other people who were involved, but those two really did a fabulous job. So
wonderful. I think, Wendy, this is such an incredible feat. I think 8 million people, and you're talking about changing an axle. I think it's really about turning the whole place 360. And I think you brought a really nice aspect of, the underlying thing is that it's the people and their appetite. And I think leadership is something that is really felt and perceived, and big changes such as the one that you just mentioned are sort of successful because of the people and because it has the people at its heart. And I often say this, Paddy probably has heard this before, but the minds of the people can be bought with a paycheck. It's the hearts of the people that need to be earned with a purpose. And so once, you really connect with everyone on that purpose, that's when we, gather that collective intent. And so let's maybe look a little bit, at the whole thing from a female leadership perspective. And as a female in the professional world myself, I've come across so many wonderful leaders. I've had the pleasure of working with both men and women, each of whom I've learned a lot from. But I sat back to do a little analysis to see if there were any trends in terms of my learnings with, the different genders. And we'd probably record a different episode for that, Paddy, but I'm quite interested to hear, Wendy, what is your biggest tip for females to succeed in the professional world?
Ooh, biggest tip. Can I give a few little tips? So one of the things that I haven't been very good at doing is being not me, right? I try to not be me. I try to be someone else, someone impressive, right? As an example, or someone like really, just impressively awesome and, serious, and I'm not terribly good at that. That doesn't mean I'm not serious. It means I just don't come across like that. So one of the things that I would say is it can be really good. And I think it's really important to have, I'm going to go with another analogy. Let's go with this, right? So, and I'm not very good at DIY, so apologies, but it's like having a tool belt of different tools. So my go-to tool might be a screwdriver, right? But that's not going to help with a bolt. So I need to find a way in which I can have a spanner that's authentically me, that would undo a bolt. And then I might also need, and I'm going to run out of tools now, a hammer. And therefore I need to, yes, I can see that someone has got a hammer. I don't have a hammer. I need to learn how to have a hammer that is authentically me. So the authentic you needs to be there, but you might have to have different tools. And I say that because it can feel like, so I've been in an environment which will remain nameless, I'm sure we can all guess, where I've been the only female in the room, and actually I would have to behave in a really quite different way to try and be like the people who were around me. And there was some, at this particular place, there was some degree of interest in having me be like everybody else, which was pretty tricky. So I tried to be like everybody else. For example, I wouldn't have worn this jumper. I would have worn a very grey one. I would have just, had very sort of, dull kind of hair, and try not to be too, girly or anything like that, or lively. And I tried really hard to be like that. And I had a coach, and I said, I'm really struggling to not be me. And they said, well, why don't you not be you for 3 meetings a week? Because actually all the rest of the time we need you to be you, but for those 3 meetings you could be like that. So actually it became a game, which of course I love. So it became a game to actually be a little bit more grey, a little bit more quiet, sit on my hands, not misbehave. And that was actually a really good lesson, because it meant that I had in my tool set, whatever tool that would be, but my version of it, because I actively knew I was doing it. So there's an authenticity one there. I think the other thing is to find your passion, find what really makes you excited or happy, and then bring that to any situation that you find. And the reason I say that is because in life, as I say, I have 5 children. It can be, if I thought it through too much, I would just be torn between career and being a mum. And actually, you have to be exactly where you are. So probably that would be the biggest one, I would say. Be exactly where you are. So wherever you are. So here, so even though I know that my son has come home and hasn't made the dog bark, he actually came to the door. I ignored him totally. Gosh, I'm so tough. But actually, I ignored him totally. And he knew that as soon as he saw that I was doing this, he just stepped away, because he knows that when I'm with him, like when I go and see him after this podcast, I will be absolutely full on. You won't exist to me, right? But at the moment, he doesn't exist to me. That sounds really harsh. But actually, if you can do that, you're giving the whole of yourself to the situation that you're currently in. And then you're taking the whole of yourself and you're giving it to the next situation. So it's bringing your passion and being able to compartmentalize. And I think that there's probably two other things that I would pick up on. And I think these are actually quite important because I didn't realize them. So I guess they must be. First of all, you are going to have difficult days, right? That example that I told you about where I was trying to be a say yes bloke, I actually really struggled with that. And there were many days when I really, really struggled and I felt like I, not in the right place and I really wasn't getting any traction or whatever. Sometimes you have to go, you know what, this is just not going to work. But other times, if you can, use a Mary Poppins-ism, which is, if you can find the fun, then snap the jobs again. Actually, it would be a case of, okay, now what can I learn from this? What other skills can I actually learn from these people that are around the table? And I will do things like, if I see someone at work, so at NatWest Group, we've got a few people who I really, really admire. And they will have skill sets I really wish I had. And so I'll go and say to them, you've got the skill set, I really wish I had that. How do you think I might do that? Tell me how you do it. And try and see if I can actually steal some of that skill set to actually bring back to make authentically me. So developing resistance, developing your strengths in those circumstances is very powerful, and it means it doesn't weigh you down too much. And then just finally, something that I didn't realize, build and care for your network, right? I didn't really think of it at all when I first started out. And then I kept seeing people, the same people popping up in these different places. And actually, we could have really pulled together in a sort of across the industry where any of us actually to have really understood early enough, hey, this is what a network is called, because we didn't really think about that then. It was before LinkedIn. So caring and helping others wherever you can, servant leadership wherever you can, is a really beautiful way to just pull those threads together. So yeah, build your network.
Wow, those are some pretty powerful words there. And I think the last one that you emphasized on building your network, I think it's ever so important to do that while you're starting your journey. More so now in the post-pandemic world where, all our connections are virtual, and the need to be authentic and being comfortable being authentic in your skin. And so, Wendy, you mentioned that you've, worked with a lot of young talents, and organizations around the world are sort of debating and contemplating what the younger workforce needs, as they're in the professional world at a time where the market is so fragile. So with that in mind, how would you summarize your approach to leadership for young talents?
So I think probably the best thing to do is to actually have belief, right? So I believe in championing the potential of those next up and coming leaders. Now, when I was younger, I didn't feel that. I probably felt more threatened by people who were coming through. Because when I think about it, there is only with hierarchical organizations, there's only certain room for a certain number at the top, and it's kind of pushing from the ground up. So I can kind of understand why people don't like to take that approach. They don't want to grow and nurture. But I've actually found, and it could be just a maternal thing, but I don't think it is, because I never really see myself as being particularly maternal. But actually, the idea that you could take someone and help them to be the very best them they could be, by your actions and by the learning and by the help and the people you connect them with, is so satisfying. So I would say that, really thinking through that type of thing, just each individual person, what might I do? And it might not be something you actually do, but it might be something you can help other people do. So, for example, we use things like formal learning, on-the-job training, we do partnering, we do work shadowing, we do come along and listens. So sometimes people call it an advisory chair. We do build your strength circles. We do mini mentor. Mini mentor is really good. So mini mentor is that I get loads of ladies asking me if I could be their mentor, right? And if I could, I wouldn't actually have time to do my job, but I really, really want to, right? So I'll say, okay, fine, you've got 15 minutes. Tell me what it is that's on your mind. What is it you're trying to get? What problem have you got in particular? And they'll say, well, you know, like one I had today, they'll say what they have as a problem. I go, I know someone who's fixed that problem. Why don't I put you in contact with them? And I then do an introduction, and I say it's mini mentoring, right? Because I don't want to overwhelm the other person without any notice. So maximum 3 sessions within 3 months, and then I will meet back with the person, see how they go on. So it's just checking in with people, and it means that, you know, you can kind of do that alongside your day job without it being too onerous for you, but you're still giving yourself, and you're giving of yourself and giving something. So then the other things we would do, well, Paddy will know, things like secondments. So I think we loaned you out and you sprinkled your fairy dust wherever you went. So that was lovely. And internal mobility opportunities. And I use that for, whether it's for, so for example, we have a BAME population, and we were really seeing that, you know, they perhaps weren't getting the opportunities. So it's like making an absolute effort to give eternal mobility opportunities or work shadowing opportunities, or you know, this is something that's coming up in the future, getting some training on that. So we've got NatWest Academy where you can get training on all sorts of things, actually to get people who aren't trained into a position where they could usefully contribute. And then we have on side of desk kind of activities, so hackathons now, homeathons, you know, innovation days and stuff like that, where people can actually bring their skills, even jam jarring their skills into something that would give them experience for their CVs. So I guess I could go on for ages. This is something that I really think is important. Oh, I will go on. I will actually. So on my leadership team, we had 2 senior people who moved to other roles, and that meant that I had an opportunity to see what we could do with people underneath. And there were 3 roles, and there was 2 ladies and a man. Those ladies and a man were incredibly good talent, but would never really have got an opportunity to take that next role, because they wouldn't have had that. They were previously too far down the organisation to really have got the experience that would allow them to have that opportunity. So what I did with each of them was to put them into the role for, you know, 6 months, just to get that, so they get that on the CV. It might work out, it might not work out. They'd certainly learn, and it would really be a good opportunity for them. And if it didn't work out, I said, you know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But actually, let's really do whatever we can to make it work out. And one particular one of the 3, it did all work out for them. There's all happy endings. But one of the set of them, they had to deal with an awful lot of kind of passive resistance, really, to their appointment, because previously they were, you know, a bit further down. And actually, just where we were sitting, just like, as soon as there's anything wrong, we all swarmed around to try and give that person the skill set, performance coach to work with them, got our fantastic head of strategy and transformation to work with them. And actually, they ended up, the business side person said they were 100% supportive of that young engineering talent to be made into a domain lead. And that was fantastic to actually see that happening. And once that happened, obviously, it gives everybody a spring in their step with regard to, well, what is possible. So it's just setting the role modeling again of you know, setting the role model and setting out, this is what I'm expecting people to do in their teams too.
Well, Wendy, I have to say I'm such a huge fan of leadership that supports acceleration and career development. And Paddy has really told me all about, you know, his stint with you. And so I really know that, you know, you're a leader invested in that. But I'm also a huge fan of, you know, leadership that invests in learning and development. And that's what I've luckily made my career out of. In the last 5 years, I've kind of been really fortunate to see and lead unlocking potential through learning and development trainings, and you know, on the job trainings, etc. And Paddy, I've talked about it so many times. So tell us a little bit about, you know, what has been your biggest inspiration? Because anywhere you're trying to unlock any potential, it always goes back to that one inspiration that spurs you on and makes you get out of your bed in the morning. So can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had inspiration from all sorts of people all the way through my life, so I couldn't actually pinpoint just one thing, but I can pinpoint a couple of people who have skill sets that I completely admire and probably don't have enough of. So if I think of Malala Yousafzai, I'm never sure if I pronounced that right. So I mean, she escaped being assassinated by the Taliban, and I think she was the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, sometimes when you're working in an environment, in a working environment, it can seem like if you put your head above the parapet and say, no, that's not right, we need to do this, let's move, let's lead forward, that seems to be something that allows you to then be very much in the sights of anyone who might want to not have that challenge. And I actually think of her as being just so brave in ways that, you know, it really matter. You know, so she's a real champion for education for girls, a really proper topic, you know, and nothing to do with office politics. But I take that inspiration. It's just like, no, I understand that it's much easier to just keep your head down below the parapet, but actually, no. If you want something because it's the right thing to do and it's aligned to your purpose or your company's purpose, then you should be doing something about that. So if you feel it inside, you should be doing something about that. And I guess, you know, on the same sort of theme, probably Greta Thunberg, because she was such a small voice. I mean, such a small voice, and she changed fundamentally our approach to thinking about climate and having it in our normal way of talking and actually thinking about those things. Fundamental. And it reminds me a little bit about the sort of butterfly's wings. You know, this tiny little movement can make this really massive difference. And I think those, just believing that you can make the difference, just don't give up, just make that difference when it's something that really matters to your customer, to your colleagues, to your company. Do it. Just don't give up. You only have to take that little step, and eventually it becomes something that really makes a difference. And I think both of those girls have set amazing examples of that.
I love that. Women supporting women. Paddy, back to you.
Oh, wow. I was just listening patiently there. Some amazing insights there, Wendy. And the one thing that really resonated with me was when you talked about, you know, trying to be yourself, and for a period of time you were having to be someone else. And I have to tell you, like, for me, the time I spent in our team was the time that I felt like I'd taken off the shackles, because for many years I'd kind of suppressed a lot of my cultural side in the workplace. So I remember once for being told off by a colleague because I was speaking to another colleague in Punjabi in the workplace, and I was told off. I was literally told, hey, like, I'm not comfortable with you speaking in your language. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm sorry, dude. I wasn't talking about you. We were just having some banter about stuff, and it was nothing bad about anyone else. But moments like that really got me to suppress that side. And I felt like, oh, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do this. But in our team, we embraced that diversity and almost encouraged people to really showcase that side. It got to a stage when I took it too far, I think, Wendy, at times, because I think I was known in Deutsche Bank for every training session I used to run. I'd get everyone to get up and do Bhangra dancing at the start, and people were, after a while, word got round, and they were like, "Oh my God, he's gonna ask me to dance. I don't want to dance. He's gonna get me to stand up." But I think, you know, for me, that was amazing. That's a gift. That's a gift, I think, that I received from you guys, and ever since then, I've just carried on doing it. So thank you for that.
That sounds amazing. A bit of Bhangra. Yeah, exactly. Good stuff. Good for you. Well, I think our COO, Kim, she also got the management team to do dancing, which I'm sure they were really delighted about. So, good for you. I mean, I think you have to just celebrate yourself, and it stops being a celebration when it excludes others. But the example you gave of having banter, that's not really, you know, that isn't really trying to exclude others. And I think the key thing is inclusiveness. And I remember just before you joined the company, I'd just been promoted, and there was a little bit of She only got that because she's a woman, right? And I, that wasn't really ideal. So when I did my first global town hall, as is, in my new role, I did my global town hall. And I said, before I start, I just want to, cover off something. And I put the first slide up, and it was, she only got this job because she's a woman. And I said, look, I'm going to spend the next five minutes just cantering through my career, and then you can make a choice. And actually, that was really good because that stopped that nonsense and that stupid. Well, maybe it didn't stop. Maybe I just didn't hear it anymore. But actually, because I know how unpleasant that felt, it became really important to me to make sure that I absolutely did not do that. Hence, and similarly, it's interesting because when I hired my leadership team, when I turned over the names and just hired on skill sets, I actually ended up with 50% females. And I had someone complain that actually I was showing positive discrimination. I thought, I just don't believe that anyone takes as much trouble not to be discriminatory as I have done. So it's really funny, but you can't please everybody. So you just have to just try and do your best.
In the words of Snoop Doggy Dogg, there will be haters. Hey, Wendy, there will be haters.
There will be haters, yeah.
So moving on, if you were to give your younger self some advice, so 5 years ago when you were in your 20s, if you had to give yourself some advice, what might that be?
I think that being a perfectionist is it's almost a disease nowadays, right? And I would say, so my father, back to my engineering father, it's like, if it isn't perfect, it's not good. I remember coming home with a music grade of 99%, which actually in reality is not bad, right? Came back with his music grade and he said, why didn't you get 100? Now, it's possible that he actually was doing it in a laughy way, but at the time, he didn't show any laughing. He was just like, that's just not good enough kind of thing. And I actually became really quite a perfectionist with regard to the things that I was doing. And I really worked super hard. There's nothing wrong with working super hard. But I think, you shouldn't make perfect the enemy of the good. And that's really letting go of that perfectionism to do your best job without it having to be perfect. Just do your best and let's evolve it from there. That's where Agile comes in again. Back to your comment on Agile from earlier. And there'll be times like with cybersecurity where it has to be perfect, or if you're doing some sort of nuclear plant, perfect then. But actually, with many of these things, perfect is slightly subjective, and therefore, if you just do something really good, you're still adding value.
Got it. No, love that. Thank you so much. So the future, what does the future hold for you, Wendy? What have you got any plans that you'd like to share? Like what's next in your journey?
I'm just writing I'm writing an article at the moment with one of my colleagues called Carrie-Anne Clayton, and we're writing it on the evolution of the Chief Digital Officer. And what I believe, Paddy, is that the reason why we had Chief Digital Officers is because there was this chasm between business and technology. The business people like things fast, they like things slick, and all sorts of third parties would sell them slick, nice things. And the technology teams that they had to deal with were like old and slow and spoke different languages, and they seemed to have loads of governance and everything. And never the twain, these two tribes went like that. And then digital came along, and the only way that they could actually get involved in that sort of dynamic was to actually take someone from a CDO from the business side, make them a CDO, and the business ran the CDO stuff, and it still kept the technologists in this sort of distant mode away. And I don't think that was very healthy, because it just reinforced the differences. So my role, I started with NatWest Group in the technology side, became head of technology for retail banking, and then expanded out into the D side of the CDO. So the CDO moved to another role, and I became the CDIO. And we have several CDIOs now in NatWest Group, for markets, for wealth, for commercial, myself for retail banking. But what that meant is that I sit very much in between. I've got the CEO for retail banking as my one boss, and the CAO for services for the company is the other boss. And actually, it's like a hybrid role in the middle. And that really is helping to pull the two together. And I actually think that that's an evolution, and I see it happening more and more. The CDO stops being just someone business, but needs to be someone who is a technologist and actually can see the two things. But what I'm not yet seeing is sufficient visibility of that at the next level. And so my objective ultimately is to actually get some sort of technology and digital representation at the top table. And the reason for that is not so that I can say, hey, I'm here, but actually it's because ultimately business won't function without the underlying digital and technology alongside it. And so rather than having these sort of discussions in isolation, having someone at the table that can help to pull those propositions and those desires for the business and move them in the right direction, I actually think that's going to be an important evolution. So what am I doing now? Well, I've just taken on an NED role with one of the Royal Bank of Scotland international entities to get into that sort of place where you can actually help to move things along. And I'll probably find either I'll go down the exclusively NED role, but I think I've got another decent role within me, and I think that probably I would be starting to think, is there something like that I could showcase and start to do? That would probably be where I'd be headed.
Oh, awesome. I'm really looking forward to that paper. Is that going to be published externally, or is that?
It is. It's being reviewed at the moment. But as soon as it is, I'll let you know.
Oh, superb. Well, Wendy, we're kind of at time, so I really just want to say huge thank you. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and I secretly use these podcasts as almost my own learning, because I get to meet such awesome people, and it's so great to get perspectives from such diverse people. So thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. So just a huge thank you from me. Barney, anything you would like to finish off on?
Thank you so much, Paddy, and thank you so much, Wendy. Such inspirational takeaways. And like Paddy said, these podcasts are also sessions for learning for myself as well. And I'm taking back so much from this. So thanks for sharing all your insights. And I'm really, really happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm learning too, so never stop.